to attempt his first long jump qualifying, and to bring you up to date, this is what he is aiming for: the 19-year record of Bob Beamon, the world record of 29.2 Pan American record, American Ralph Boston, set in 1967. Now here is how they qualify for the finals. A 25-foot 5 1/4 jump automatically moves you into the finals, and there's a minimum of 12 jumpers. We have 16 taking part in all, and of course in just a couple of moments it'll be Carl Lewis and Craig Masbach, who is with us up here. And Craig, it is not inconceivable that Lewis could, believe it or not, establish or at least try to set a world record this afternoon in the qualifying.
The qualifying rounds are normally, Dick, for qualifying. You get a jump out there at the limit of 25 feet 5 1/4 inches, and then you go home and think about tomorrow's final competition. But when we spoke with Carl yesterday, he said he's approaching this in a totally different way. This is why he came here. He wants to set the world record, plain and simple. He wants to come out here, and today, he doesn't know what the conditions will be tomorrow. Conditions could be perfect today. He wants to go for the record.
And right now, they're not perfect. Actually, there is a headwind right now. As you look at 1.3, when you see that wind gauge go 2.0, plus 2.0, it is a legal jump. Anything beyond that, it is not a legal jump. He also told us that for ideal conditions, he likes warm and humid weather, which he has, and he likes a consistent wind. And so far today, Craig, we have not had a consistent wind.
No, it's gusts behind the athletes. It's been in their face, as we saw in the most recent measurement. He may get lucky. That's what he's hoping for. He'll take the one jump for the record, qualify for tomorrow, and then of course look towards tomorrow.
And of course the media attention is vast here. This is the group of photographers that are sitting and standing beyond the pit, and they're looking down at that runway. And speaking about the runway, it of course is one that Carl Lewis loves. He's never been under 28 feet on this runway, and Brent talked about the foul in '82, and where he might have been jumping 30 feet, although they don't really measure a foul jump. He likes it because it is a hard runway and it is longer than most.
He gets to take his full run up, which is important for him because he's the fastest long jumper in the world, and it's the hard surface to jump off of that he favors the most.
Carl, of course, is trying to come back a bit from 1984. He won 4 gold medals, but the press, of course, thought he might have been a bit arrogant and artificial, and he seems to have a new image going. He has that tremendous 50-meet long jump winning streak. The last one to beat him was Larry Myricks, who, by the way, did not qualify in his first jump today. And it looks like Carl Lewis is trying to establish a new form for people to see.
I'd like to say something about that, Dick, only because in L.A. he was criticized because he didn't take all 6 long jumps. Why didn't Carl Lewis go for the world record in the Los Angeles Olympics? You know, Jesse Owens, the man he was trying to emulate in Los Angeles, never took more than twice in his career the full complement of 6 long jumps. Once at the 1936 Olympics, once at the National Championships. Carl was trying to win medals, not set world records in Los Angeles. I think the crowd misunderstood and booed him in an improper fashion.
I would agree. You know, when you buy your ticket, it doesn't say that the competitor is going to try for the world record. And of course, he won the 4 gold. Carl Lewis getting ready, and the wind is 0.9, so this would be a legal jump for Carl Lewis. Sister and mother, and of course many of you know the story of how hard the death of his father Bill took its toll on him.
And Carl says that's what he thinks about before he jumps. His father told him, keep jumping, go right out. He jumped the day after his father died. He said, keep jumping and try to be the best in the world at what you do. Carl says that's what motivates him at the end of the runway.
If he qualifies, this would probably be his only jump, although you are allowed 3, as we said. He didn't like what he saw, and a foul. So Carl Lewis fouls on the first, and he still, of course, would have 2 more.
Well, the wind was in his face. The wind gauge reads minus 2.0, meaning the wind was in his face. That throws his steps off completely. He has measured it scientifically to know that he will reach the board at his maximum speed. Can't do that when the wind is in your face.
And this is the inconsistent wind that Carl talked about. He doesn't like it this way, and so Carl Lewis fouls. He does not like the wind conditions, which changed dramatically, as you saw. Carl Lewis will be jumping again in a little while. He felt that the wind blew up into his face. Larry Myricks gave that information to Irv Cross down on the field on the first jump, and so Lewis, who has one jumper ahead of him, fouled. The wind has played tricks all day, and we might have even had a crosswind. And right now, there is a headwind at this moment, Greg.
Of almost 5 miles per hour, Dick, which is not difficult for Lewis, I wouldn't think, to qualify, to get the 25-foot jump that he would need to qualify. But Carl Lewis doesn't accept simple 25-foot jumps. As you pointed out, he's never jumped less than 28 feet on this runway. There have only been 52 jumps in history, 28 feet or longer. He's done 36 of them.
That's pretty impressive. Larry Myricks, by the way, the other American in this event, did qualify on his second jump. So Myricks, who a lot of people thought might even push Carl to greater heights.
Well, Carl has shown himself to be a great competitor on 2 main occasions in this event. Normally, he's so far ahead of everyone, there is no competition. Both times it was Larry Myricks who put a long jump out there and caused Carl to come back. Once indoors, Carl came back with a world record. And at this year's outdoor championships, Carl had to respond with his longest jump of the year in order to beat Myricks.
And of course, as we said, Myricks was the last jumper to beat Carl Lewis. Lewis, with a streak of 50 consecutive triumphs in the long jump, lost to Myricks indoors back in February of 1981. But Carl is getting set now for his second attempt.
The jumpers are allowed 3 attempts to reach this distance of 25 feet, 5 1/4 inches. 12 people will qualify for the final tomorrow.
And it's important also for our viewers who may not be familiar with this event to know that when you land, it's the it's the farthest point to the back or to the block that you jump that it's measured in, not necessarily the front.
Yep. If you put your hand down, for example, when you land and it's behind your feet, which is usually the point closest to the takeoff board, then that in fact is where they measure from.
A headwind, slight headwind for Carl Lewis here. And that could change as he comes down the runway.
Athletes in the field events are very sensitive to the wind. The pole vaulters, the high jumpers, and the long jumpers often will wait on the end of the runway until they feel the wind shift on a day like this, then they take off.
Lewis's second jump. He's entitled to 3 to qualify for the final. Capacity crowd is hushed in anticipation for Lewis's performance. Each jumper is entitled to 3 minutes to get ready, and Carl said he prefers to take about a minute.
He usually steps right out there and runs. This is all accounted for by the wind, I think, here. As you see, he has only a minute left now. He's waiting until the wind is still, which he thinks are the best conditions for jumping, or, of course, a wind at his back.
Carl Lewis for the finals. He was way behind the board, so he didn't even come close to that plasticine, which caused him the problems with the foul back in 1982.
He took what I think you'd call a safe jump, Dick. He didn't want to take a chance of fouling again and coming down to only one opportunity. His speed was very good early on, but his steps were off because the wind was in his face again. And when he took off, he was clearly behind the board. He reached out well, but he really was nowhere near his normal level. Look at the concentration on his face. At the same time, he's very relaxed. You could see he stuttered his step just before he took off. It really looked like what they call a pop jump.
And the 8.06 in meters translates into 26.5 1/2 inches. That's nowhere near the Pan Am record, but it qualifies Carl Lewis. All right, Irv, thank you very much. Carl Lewis looking for that 30-foot barrier. What is that all about? We'll discuss it when we come back to track and field in just a moment. The competition will start shortly in the men's long jump, and Carl Lewis will be the focus of everyone in the sold-out stadium as he tries to better Bob Beeman's world long jump record. 19 years ago, Bob Beeman set the record in the 1968 Mexico City Olympics, 29 feet 2.5 inches, and Lewis likes the runway here. He hopes to do it. But what is going to be of paramount interest here, Craig Masback, will be the wind conditions. That really is the key here.
World records are difficult to set in track and field. You need almost ideal conditions, and I believe certainly that Carl can set the record, but the wind was a problem all day yesterday. He told us the most important thing in setting the record would be a good, consistent wind. He'd prefer no wind at all, but if it was going to be a wind, it should be at his back and consistent. We had swirling winds yesterday.
And they bothered Carl. In fact, yesterday, let's go back to the qualification. Carl Lewis did not qualify in his first attempt, and then he did on the second, although he claimed that the conditions were even worse this time around.
He got halfway down the runway, Dick, and the wind came right into his face. He was 8 to 10 inches short of the board, and it was all his athletic ability was needed to stretch out to 26 feet.
Now, there's another fine American long jumper here in Larry Myricks who could conceivably press Carl today.
Well, Larry's the last person to beat Carl Lewis. Carl has won 50 straight since then. Myricks was in the 1976 Olympics when Lewis was still in high school. A great veteran who's having his best season ever.
Can you imagine trying to jump 30 feet? And you imagine what is 30 feet? Well, Irv Cross will tell us more as soon as we take a look at the final jump list. And Jaime Jefferson of Cuba is another possible threat in the competition here as you look at the field. And on the second page, Carl Lewis and Larry Myricks represent the United States. But to get a better look at what 30 feet might be, right now let's go down to the field and Irv Cross. Irv?
You know, Dick, despite the problems that Carl Lewis had here jumping yesterday, he loves jumping in this stadium. You know, the runway is long and it's fast, and the sand in the pit is very soft. And in 1982 here, he recorded an unofficial jump of somewhere close to 30 feet, and he's been driven by that memory ever since. Carl Lewis is a man with a mission to jump farther than any man has ever leaped before and set a new world record in the long jump. But that task is a formidable one, to say the least, because Lewis is challenging the oldest record in all of track and field. The long jump record has stood for almost 19 years since Bob Beeman jumped 29 feet 2.5 inches in Mexico City. Lewis was only a child when Beeman set the record, but he began dreaming of the day when he might challenge that barrier.
I was about 10 or 11, really, really young, right when I started to understand, you know, what that performance was. It really looks long anywhere but out here. I mean, it still looks long out here, but it looks long anywhere. If you're just like on the yard or something, it looks, and like even a football field, 10 yards doesn't look very far, but it's a long ways.
Nobody knows how far better than Lewis. He has challenged Beeman's record more often than any other athlete, and once jumped close to the magic 30-foot barrier, only to have the jump called a foul. But really, how far is 30 feet? How far to fly? Well, imagine jumping the length of a stretched limousine and landing a full 6 feet beyond. Or measured vertically, leaping over a flagpole in a single bound. You probably don't think twice about crossing the street, but imagine crossing the street without ever having your feet touch the ground. But how far is 30 feet? Who can jump that far? Well, imagine Michael Jordan taking off from beyond the three-point line to stuff a basketball. Or have you ever seen a tennis player leap over the net to shake an opponent's hand and land almost near the service line? 30 feet. Carl Lewis, a man with a mission.
I'm a little bit more focused on jumping far this year than I have been, you know, really ever before. Not necessarily just the world record, but jumping as far as I can, because we feel that I can jump farther on, you know, beyond that point, and even beyond 29.6. So that's what we're focused in trying to do. And I think that, you know, I should give myself the opportunity to be first.
International rules state that you only have a foul when there's a mark made beyond the takeoff board. Now, in 1982, Carl Lewis didn't make that mark. Ironically, the same officials who worked that meet are here today, but the only foul they'll record will be a mark beyond the board.
All right, thank you, Mary, and thank you, Craig. And, of course, we have coming up the long jump, and there it is, the world record. And they'll be measuring it in meters, and we'll translate it into feet and inches, and the drama coming up in just a few moments. Right now, let's go back to Brent Musburger at the CBS Broadcast Center. Brent, 6 years old, undefeated in 50 consecutive long jump competitions. The longest winning streak, by the way, in track and field now that Edwin Moses' streak has been broken, and he is awaiting his first jump. Now, there are 12 jumpers, and each will get 3 jumps, and then the top 8 will get 3 more. And that is the format for this Pan American final in the long jump. And, of course, Carl Lewis has had personal tragedy in the last year. In May, his father, Bill, passed away. His mother, Evelyn, is here in the stands. And so earlier, Irv Cross had talked to him. There's his sister, Carol, his mother, Evelyn. Irv asked him, what has his father's death meant to him?
It's changed me in a way. I mean, I sat there and watched the whole process go, and it kind of changed me in the sense that of life and death. That's one thing. I mean, I don't think I'm as afraid because he wasn't. I'm more brave in that sense. But then also, you know, my father wanted me to continue to achieve. One thing I know, the last 2 years, I just kind of took a break and didn't concentrate as much. And down towards the end, I found out that he really wanted me to come back and be the best again. And kind of the last words or the last things that we talked about was regaining that number one status and achieving everything I can and not stopping. I know, like, the day after his funeral, I was at a track meet just because he didn't want us to stop. He wanted us to go for it, and he wanted me to be number one again and be the best. And that's the thing. He left with us, and he just told us the only way we can communicate it is by performing, because we can't feel him anymore, but he can watch us, you know. So that's the thing I owe it to him, you know, to try to be the best again.
Well, Carl's sister Carol is also a top long jumper, and his mother, the former Evelyn Lawler, as you saw, competed as a hurdler on the U.S. team in the first Pan American Games back in 1951. There is one jumper now, Mark Mason of Guyana, who is ahead of Carl Lewis. And here is Mason, and I guess this is part of the maturing process of Carl Lewis from what the feeling was in 1984, Craig.
Well, you know, it goes back even further than that, Dick. He was a competitor in the Pan American Games back in 1979 as an 18-year-old and finished third, and fame and attention came very quickly to him. I think it was his family that helped shield him for a while, but by the time it got to 1984, the eyes of the world were on Carl Lewis. Amateur athletes don't have the kind of PR mechanism surrounding them that professional athletes have. And I think Carl Lewis was open for inspection to everyone. And in some ways, some people in the media certainly found him wanting in certain respects. But he has matured. The death of his father was an agonizing process for the whole family. He was a great supporter of Carl's and a great supporter of track and field. And as Carl says, he's still taking inspiration from him.
And speaking of that inspiration, Carl is getting ready now for his first jump, and he plans to take all 6 unless, of course, he establishes the world record early. And I guess it's kind of unusual to declare a goal to break a world record, isn't it, before you do it? I mean, most of these things come as a surprise as we take a look at the wind gauge, and that is somewhat of a headwind that Carl faces right now, but that can change.
Well, that was on the previous jump, about a 2-mile-an-hour wind in the face of the athlete. Now, Carl's wind seems to be, as we look at the wind indicator there, that's something that's put there to help the athletes plan when to begin their run-up. That seems to be going as a wind at his back, which of course he would favor in this condition. But he'll wait until the wind is just right. He'll think about what he wants to do on the runway, and then he'll take off.
It's a Mondo rubberized surface. Very fast runway. And when you consider that Willie Banks set the triple jump record a couple of years ago, and Jackie Joyner-Kersee set the long jump record, or tied the world record, this is obviously a fast runway indeed.
They call it a fast pit, but they're referring, of course, to the runway. Carl takes a longer run than the other athletes, so the status of the runway is more important to him. He runs about 173 feet, it's about 60 yards, and then launches himself into space. You know, he told us the other day that people don't appreciate you jump close to 30 feet and you land on the sand. It hurts a little bit.
Here he comes. didn't like the pacing, and his first jump goes by the board, so to speak.
Speed was excellent on the runway, and you can see him focusing. He has check marks along the way to let him know where he is. He obviously got close in and realized, look how far behind the board he was. He figured it wasn't even worth it to take the jump with that sort of status. And again, the wind was playing tricks. 2.6 meters per second in his face. That's over 5 miles an hour in his face. Obviously not the conditions he wanted.
Thank you very much. And as you look at the current standings and don't find Carl Lewis's name, while we're looking for the records, there's always the competition itself, and we have one shaping up here. The other American, as we told you, is Larry Myricks, the last man to beat Lewis back in 1981, and this was his first jump to take the lead, Craig Masbach.
He's the one that's challenged Lewis most consistently over the years, and he had a very, very good jump. He was jumping into a wind just as strong as Lewis was jumping into, but he pulled it off.
Now, Jaime Jefferson, who is the defending Pan American leader and has gone over 27 feet, had his first jump, and he actually took the lead of 26.7 and a quarter, and that was wind aided. And Jefferson took the lead on his second jump of 26.9, and now Carl Lewis is up, and right now Lewis is way down there.
I think this in some ways will help us out this afternoon. The previous jump to Carl's, first of all, we now notice had the wind at the back, so Lewis can now hope that the wind will be at his back for once on one of his jumps. Also, he's a great competitor. Every time he's been challenged in a competition, he's responded. Most recently at the National Championships, where Myricks took the lead in the 4th round, Lewis came right back with the winning jump.
He told us the other day, he says, I'll jump my best in the first 2 jumps, and when I jump far early in the high 28s, everyone else presses. That hasn't been the case so far.
He's usually used to getting off a good jump. He's normally one of the most consistent jumpers, the guy who comes right out, hits his steps perfectly on the first jump, soars very far, and then puts the pressure on the other guys. Now the pressure's on him. We have a competition now, not necessarily a record attempt.
So Lewis fighting for the gold. And he knew it. An illegal jump into 2.1 wind aided, though. I think that's a wind aided jump.
2.1 meters per second won't be a legal jump. It won't count for record purposes. That's just over the allowable limit, about 4.7 miles per hour. But you could see as soon as he hit the pit, he knew he had a great jump. That's the sign of a great athlete. Tom Tellez, his coach, says Carl has a better feel than any athlete he's ever worked with.
And of course, if it is wind aided, it would not go in the books as a world record if it is that. But of course, you can win the competition with a wind aided jump. And this was beautiful.
Well, it is perfection when you look at Lewis on the runway. Everything in control, the motion forward. He's a great sprinter who right there turns into a great long jumper. The double hitch kick form that keeps his body in the right position, and then he throws his arms back and thrusts himself forward out of the pit. Here he is again. He's a sprinter in this stage. He wants to generate 27 mile per hour speed on the runway. When he gets close, he shortens his step and then reaches for the sky. He looks back. You can see his head slightly back. His legs fall forward. He throws his arms back, and then he goes out of the pit.
8.75 meters, and that's 28.8 inches. 28.8 inches for Carl Lewis. It certainly gives him the lead right now on a fine jump, although it is wind aided. It is the 8th longest jump in history. So as we take a look at the standings during the second, Carl Lewis has taken the lead. The 8th longest jump ever has given him the lead in the current standings in the men's long jump. Jaime Jefferson of Cuba is second, and the other American, Larry Myricks, is third. Now Myricks had the lead after the first jump, but then fouled on his second jump and fell down, Craig.
Well, Myricks was jumping after Lewis's jump. He had a very strong wind at his back, and he just went over the line. Had a good jump, but he fouled by just about an inch.
And then Jaime Jefferson from Cuba, who is the defending champion, got off this terrific jump. It was legal, and it was good enough for a new Pan American Games record.
And like Lewis, he has tremendous speed. He used it to great advantage for that particular jump.
So Lewis has the lead, and there is one jumper ahead of him, and now Lewis, taking his jacket off, is getting set for his third jump. Keep in mind, we started with 12 jumpers, and each one gets 3. And after the 3, the top 8 move to the final, so to speak, and get 3 more jumps. And Lewis, who had a wind-aided 28.8½ in his second attempt after he aborted his first one and was marked out at 22 feet plus. This is the media coverage here, and it is larger than yesterday when we had a considerable group of photographers here. And there are the cameras that are just lined up on the pit at the end there, anticipating once again what Carl Lewis is trying to achieve, and that is beat Bob Beeman's record, world record, 19 years of 29 2.5 inches.
Well, we started to talk earlier that it's very hard to predict records in track and field. 165 countries are active participants in the sport, and many of them, as we've seen in the Pan American Games, many of the small countries even have world record potential athletes. But Lewis is the kind of guy who likes to set himself up for defeat, for failure. He said he's going for the record. We're here to cover it.
Told us the other day he's stronger and, amazingly enough, even taller than he was in '84. He said he had grown and gained 5 pounds in the process. We will also see Carl Lewis anchoring the 4x100 men's relay, which is going to be coming up in a little while. So Lewis, concentrating on the long jump, knows he also has the relay to run shortly.
I'm sure he's trying to block thoughts of running that anchor leg on the relay out of his mind now. He wants to take this jump, then he'll go hand off some batons with his teammates to warm up for that relay, run the relay, and then take his next jump.
It's amazing that Lewis, one of the most celebrated track stars ever with the 4 gold medals in the '84 Olympics, owns no individual world records. So this obviously would mean a lot to him. Jump, and it is a fair jump, and it is a legal jump. So all of the conditions are there. The question is, what will it measure out to?
He took off way behind the takeoff board. The guy almost a foot behind. I'd have to think that if he had taken off right on the board, it would have threatened the record there. But again, long jumping is all about speed on the runway being converted into horizontal, not vertical distance. You don't want to go way high up in the air. You want to use that speed, and then as you take off, there he's on the board, but just on it. You want to use your horizontal speed to stretch out as he does there, but not really to a world record type distance.
Most of his jumps yesterday and today have been several inches behind the board.
Well, that's the wind that plays havoc with this. He sets up his jump for a perfect wind, no wind at all. Then as the conditions have changed, he's tried to adjust. You can see he shortened his last step there and then reached out for 8 meters 53, which as his mother looked on here, she obviously enjoyed the jump.
It appears that it is about 28 feet. And on the scoreboard, that would measure out to 8.53 meters if it is indeed a 28-foot jump. Keep in mind that until yesterday, Carl Lewis had never jumped less than 28 feet here in Indianapolis. Larry Myricks, who defeated him indoors, of course, the last man to win and the current indoor champion also in this competition. Jaime Jefferson of Cuba. Lewis in first place. And they take their time here.
Well, these are electronic measuring devices. In fact, ironically enough, they're East German measuring devices. When they measured Jackie Joyner's world record leap the other evening, the leap that tied the East German Heike Drexler's record, it was done with an East German device and East German technicians.
And we had about a 15-minute wait when Jackie Joyner-Kersee matched the world record in the long jump, and so we have a wait here. And so we want to let you know that the United States and Uruguay battling it out in men's basketball in Market Square Arena. And just to tell you that it was a 28-foot leap for Carl Lewis, and it is a new Pan American record, breaking Jaime Jefferson's jump just before. So Lewis has taken the lead. He has had the lead. He has a new Pan American record and a lot more coming up, including basketball, when we return to the Pan American Games. He is in first place right now, and prior to that had the 8th longest jump ever, but it was wind-aided. We have a medal ceremony going on right now. The national anthem for the victory by Mike Tully in the pole vault, but that was not Mike Tully standing in there, was he?
Tully probably headed off to Europe for some of the big meets over there. They had to stand in the ceremony.
All right. Well, sometimes stand-ins come in and they end up playing Broadway for years and years. Anyway, here's Carl Lewis into a headwind right now, but that could change. And don't forget, Lewis, right after this jump, will get set to anchor the men's 4x100 relay.
Well, he's done this before in the World Championships in 1983. He actually had to run from the long jump, anchor the team to a world record in the 4x1, and then return to win the long jump. So it's not an uncommon situation for him.
All right, Lewis with his 4th jump. He is in 1st place. Jefferson of Cuba is 2nd, and Myricks of the United States is in 3rd.
Not an ideal condition for Carl's concentration, but he seems to have it together now.
Good takeoff and a good leap, and he knows it. Let's see how close he is or whether he surpassed the 28.5 wind-aided. This was a fair jump and a legal jump as well. So this is not a wind-aided jump. So this is going to be one of the top jumps as they mark it from the farthest most point back that Carl Lewis landed. On this 4th attempt here, he is far out in front here.
Here you see him from head on, and Carl does what he always says he wants to do. He wants to be a world-class sprinter. As he gets down towards the takeoff board, he wants to start thinking about being someone who controls himself in the air like a sprinter. Shortened his step there and then reached out very well. You can see him come forward right out of the jump.
Lewis's longest jump ever is 28.10 inches. He did it here in Indianapolis once and once indoors in New York. And the numbers would show 8.79 on the scoreboard to reflect that.
Right there, you see him stamp his foot down to shorten, and then he jumps well off the board.
Now they measure, but an outstanding jump by Carl Lewis. Again, as we've said, unbeaten in 50 consecutive long jump competitions. Longest streak in track and field.
Okay, no problem.
Family in the stands.
Of course, his sister, a great long jumper as well. She was 3rd at the World Championships in 1983. He has a brother who was a very fine soccer player, so the whole family involved with sports. Both his parents were teachers of physical education in his hometown of Willingboro, New Jersey.
And there it is, 8.75, 28.5 inches. So that will match. But this was not wind-aided. So this was an outstanding jump by Carl Lewis, who has the lead after 4. Here are the current standings in the men's long jump, and Carl Lewis, with a new Pan American record, has the lead, and Jaime Jefferson had a pretty good jump on his 4th attempt, 27 feet 10 inches. That was wind-aided, but it's good enough to give him 2nd place, and Larry Myricks in 3rd has faltered after a good 1st jump, Craig.
Well, Myricks actually rode a great wind for his best jump also in the 4th round, so he knows that he's still jumping well, but it's getting late for him to start having those 28-foot jumps. He usually has his best jumps earlier in the competition.
So now Carl has 2 more jumps. 28.8. Keep in mind that his best jump ever was 28.10 He's done it twice, one time here in Indianapolis, and with 2 jumps left, and you've seen what he's done today, 22, 28.8, 28 and 28.8. He's got a pretty strong wind behind him. What about the possibility of approaching 29 now?
Well, there are 2 sides to it. One, he's a little tired, having taken 4 jumps already, plus run on the relay. The other side is he knows he's won this competition. The pressure is off in that regard. Now he knows he could just go out there and let it hang out. And I know that Carl came here for that reason, the record-setting reason. He hasn't forgotten that at this point. He's got 2 jumps. I'm sure he's still thinking record in his mind right here.
Well, Tom Tellez said the world record is what he prepared for. So he's had the motivation.
Carl is already thinking ahead a little bit towards next year. Says he wants to match his 4 gold medals of 1984. And then he says he's going to run a couple more years, maybe start running the 400 a little bit.
And retirement looms at some point, and He says when you start thinking of retirement, these kinds of events mean more to you. The wind conditions are not good for him right now. He got off a terrific jump, wind aided by a pretty substantial margin, and it was a legal jump.
It's about 8-mile-per-hour wind, which is over the allowable 4.5 miles per hour. And Carl says, how do you do the long jump? How do you beat Carl Lewis? Says you got to have a lot of aggression as you run towards the board. The board is only 8 inches wide, and we'll see here he actually goes behind the board, so he's losing 8 inches immediately on his jump. Then you got to run as if you're running off a cliff. Well, unfortunately, here we see again another angle. Carl, good speed on the runway, but he stutters a little bit at the end, takes off behind the board, and then stretches out well, but 8 meters 68.
And that's 28.5 3/4 inches, so that is his third best jump. Meanwhile, Jaime Jefferson, who at this point is in third place in the men's long jump, is attempting his 6th and final jump. His best today was 27 feet 10 inches. It was wind aided, and this is his last attempt to move into second place.
He's been close to his personal best of 27.10 1/4 with that last jump, or jump two jumps ago. He's been very strong all day, and Jefferson's a veteran competitor. He's a great sprinter like Lewis, and he's got a chance to ride this very strong wind. The winds are now gusting up to about 10 miles per hour. If he can ride one of those winds, he can take off and really have a great jump.
Keep in mind that the wind would affect any records, but it doesn't affect the distance in the competition.
No, there's certainly cases where the wind has even shifted dramatically during a competition where the first guy to jump had the wind at his back and won on that first jump.
And Jefferson. And that is a fair jump. And the wind died down, so that was a legal jump, we think. It says 1.2 on the wind gauge.
Well, and because the wind was not strong, suddenly it dropped to about 2 miles per hour. That's why he started off from behind the board. And you'll see as he comes down very, very strong, he'll step right on the board just at the start of it, probably loses about 6 or 7 inches with that effort.
All right, that was Jefferson's last jump. We still have Lewis to come. Myricks is in second right now as we see the time of 8:51, the distance 27 feet 11 inches. That may be his all-time best for Jefferson, and he will still remain in third place in the long jump. Is in second, so the United States is 1-2 right now, and Jefferson already has taken his 6 jumps. Lewis has 1 jumper in front of him before he attempts his 6th and final attempt. Olivier Cadier of Brazil will be the 1 jumper before Carl Lewis's last attempt.
Brazil's had some good success at the Pan American Games. Joaquim Cruz, who we saw win the 1,500 meters earlier in the week, they won the steeplechase as well. One of the top South American powers in track and field. You can see that Cadier just has nowhere near the speed of Myricks or Jefferson or Lewis on the runway.
He had a headwind there, and it was a fair jump.
A fair jump, but he just doesn't have the power or the speed. So when he gets to the runway, he can't even execute the same sort of motions in the air as the other jumpers.
Greg, while we wait for Carl Lewis for his 6th jump, one man we haven't mentioned is Raymond Pierre, who won the 400 in a tremendous victory, beating Burt Cameron of Jamaica, and maybe a kind of a signal race for this young man who may be coming into his own now.
Well, Pierre really was unexpected as far as the 400-meter open race was concerned. We knew that we'd see him in the relay, but he was put on the team at the last moment. He was 5th in our national championships, and we had no other American entrant in that event. Suddenly, they put him in the open 400 against Cameron, the '83 world champion. He came through with a brilliant race.
A headwind, slight headwind, that's right this moment, and that probably will change as Carl comes down the runway for his 23 steps, 173 feet. He said he liked the runway because it is longer than most and harder. This is his last chance
You know, you mentioned Myricks in second with that great 28-foot jump. He's finished second to Lewis 13 times during Lewis's 50-meet win streak, so it's not an unaccustomed situation for him.
Evelyn, who competed as the hurdler, first Pan Am Games back in '51.
The wind is swirling now, Dick, and that's what's holding Carl up. He really knows that he's got to have perfect conditions for the record. He realizes that it's within his grasp, but he's just going to wait now until he has those perfect conditions. Unlikely, unfortunately, given the wind today.
Basically, though, the wind conditions have not been ideal these 2 days.
No, I was here in 1983 when Carl jumped an excellent series of jumps in the national championships. Then the wind was completely still. It was a warm day, which Carl likes. Here, the wind has really worked against him just about on every jump. Carl has 3 minutes in which to take each of his jumps. He's got about a minute and a half left. He'll wait until the wind, he feels the wind at his back.
This capacity crowd is hushed like it hasn't been all week.
You know, Dick, you mentioned that this record has stood for 19 years. Jesse Owens set a record in the 1936 Olympics in long jump that stood for 24 years. So maybe Lewis is facing that sort of history.
All right, here it is. Final attempt by Carl Lewis. Well, he's not going to break Bob Beeman's record today. It was a fair jump and a 4.1 wind-aided jump. No record, but a great series of jumps for Carl Lewis, who will stretch his consecutive winning streak in long jump competitions to 51 with the victory here at the Pan American Games.
See a little bit of the edge off Carl here as far as his speed goes. His sixth jump, 60 yards, he has to run at full speed for each of those jumps. But I tell you, when he got to the board, he was all aggression. He, again, was behind the board. Looked like he lost at least a foot. Had good extension, but it just didn't have the necessary conditions for a record today.
And 28.5 3/4 inches for Carl Lewis. That was wind-aided. And Carl's mother knew it wasn't to be. Lewis remains in first place, and the only part of this puzzle that hasn't been filled out is Larry Myricks, who last jumped to 28.1 3/4 and has one remaining to try to catch Carl.
Let's put things in a little bit of perspective. You know, only 7 men in history have broken 28 feet in the long jump. Carl's now done it 5 times in this one competition. Still a great competition, but neither he nor us are obviously satisfied with the fact that he didn't break the record.
Carl Lewis, the leader right now. Myricks has one more. We'll be back with an interview with Carl Lewis a little later on. Meanwhile, the diving competition has been completed over at the natatorium, and when we come back, it'll be John Neighbor and Phil Boggs will report. Now, they're here now with it, so let's go to the natatorium. Carl Lewis has won the gold medal, establishing a Pan American Games record in the long jump, although he did not break Bob Beeman's record, which has lasted 19 years and still going. And right now, down on the infield is Carl Lewis with Herb Cross. Herb?
Well, Carl, Chris, it's a hot day for sure. I mean, you worked very hard, but did it all, my fool? You set the Pan Am record today, but you didn't get the world record you wanted. Was that a disappointment for you?
Yeah, Herb, you know, I felt that I could have jumped a little bit farther, but as you know, the wind conditions are still pretty tough. The nice thing about it is that everybody came here and they were very supportive. I won the Pan Am gold, and I still have some other meets to try to get that record.
I just saw you give a pair of shoes away to a couple of youngsters here. Why?
Well, you know, I like to share a little bit of moment. The people were very nice to me today, so I can get a million pairs, but those kids can't get them, so I'm happy to give them away.
Well, could you tell when you walked into the stadium today that conditions were right or not right for a world record effort?
Well, when I walked in, the wind was very swirly like it was yesterday. But jumping yesterday helped me jump farther today because I was able to gauge it a little bit better. But after the relay, I was very tired because I ran a hard leg there, and I wasn't able to recover like I wanted to.
You had some difficulty getting your steps together. Even though you had some good jumps, you weren't quite on the board the way you wanted to. Why?
Well, just like I said, the wind conditions were still difficult. The problem we were having is that the wind would blow at our backs at the beginning of the run and then blow at our face at the board or vice versa. So it makes it difficult, but everybody was able to get in one good jump at least, and I was glad that Larry was able to jump 28 because he deserves it. And I still almost jumped the personal best, so it ended up working out well.
Yeah, your coach told me yesterday, he said, you know, world records don't come when you predict it. They come when you least expect it. Right. Now, did you feel that you still had a shot at it today? I did, Irv. You know, I really did. And after the 2 28-foot-8 jumps, I really felt I was certain I had an opportunity. But, you know, things just didn't work out. And I don't think I'm down yet. It just makes it more suspenseful. Hey, I'm not getting old yet. I can still do it. Keep rooting. Don't give up on me. Oh, no one's giving up on you. But yeah, how do you? What's your timetable though from here though, Carl? The World Games, you know, are coming up at the end of the month. But what else is in your timetable? You're busy doing so many things.
Yeah, well, I'm supposed to shoot another film in the fall and then finish working on the album in the fall. And then next year I'm going to clear all that out so I can concentrate on running again. I don't plan to retire for at least a couple of years. So the next 2 years I'm going to concentrate even more on that record. I did more than last year, and I was closer, so we can get it sooner or later.
Well, you still have jumped over 28 feet more than anybody in the history of track and field, and we loved every jump. Thanks very much. So, Dick.
All right, Irv, thank you very much. We had 6 jumps of 28 feet or more, 5 of them by Carl Lewis and 1 by the silver medalist Larry Myricks. Right now, let's go back to Brent Musburger at the CBS Broadcast Center.